Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to the banks of the mighty Murray River. Thought I'd give you a bit of a change of scenery today from the chapel and from the backyard of the lodge. Today I'm going to reflect on the Beatitudes, not on the Beatitudes, sorry, on the passage that comes immediately after the Beatitudes, and that is the reflection on salt and light. You are salt and you are the light. You are salt of the earth and you are the light of the world, in Matthew 5 and from about verse 13. So I hope you enjoy this reflection as we think about what it means to actually be salt and light in the world. And the placement of the salt and the light passage matters deeply. Jesus does not say, if you behave like salt and light, then you will become my people. He simply says, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. This is identity language before it is ethical instruction, which will happen in the rest of chapter 5, and then all of chapter 6, and then all of chapter 7. Before Jesus tells his disciples what to do, he tells them who they are. We've got a lovely couple just walking past, working their dog. Hi guys, how are you? He tells them who they are. The Sermon on the Mount does not begin with a moral program, but with a declaration of grace-shaped identity. Say that again, grace-shaped identity. And yet identity has consequences. Salt that is not salty is useless. Light that is hidden contradicts its very nature. Jesus presses us into the unavoidable truth that faith in him must become visible. It must become visible to the world, not as a self-promotion, but as a faithful presence in that world. This passage asks a very searching question of the church in every generation. What does a community shaped by the kingdom values of heaven that are expounded in the Beatitudes actually look like in the ordinary public spaces of life? You are the salt of the earth in verse 13 is a very important opening to this issue. When Jesus speaks of salt, halas, he draws on a symbol loaded with meaning in the first century world that he inhabited. Salt was a preservative, slowing decay in a world without refrigeration. It's a seasoning, bringing out flavour, but not overwhelming it. And it's a purifier. It's used in sacrifices and covenant rituals. A sign of covenant faithfulness, a sign of covenant salt. And I'm thinking here in about book of Numbers 18. Salt does not exist for itself. It exists entirely for the sake of what it touches. And note that the salt actually has to come into physical presence. It actually has to come it can't be from afar. Its power is quiet, it's hidden, but it's effective. Jesus is saying that his disciples are placed into the world to resist moral and spiritual decay, not by withdrawal, but by actual presence, by nearness, by proximity. But what if salt loses its saltiness? Well, Jesus' warning, if salt loses its saltiness, is striking. Now, of course, chemically, pure salt does not lose its taste. But the salt that was used in Jesus' day was often mixed with other minerals. And when it was exposed to moisture, the true salt would leach away, leaving behind something that looked like salt, but actually had no effect. And in fact, it was actually thrown into the fire and burnt up. The warning is sobering. It's possible to retain the appearance of discipleship while losing the very substance. Faith can be diluted, mixed with compromise, fear, or the desire for approval, until it no longer preserves or heals. Salt that loses its saltiness is not evil, it's simply irrelevant. Salt and the life of faith, then, is important. Salt works invisibly. It does not draw attention to itself. It does not announce its presence. It's a powerful image for what it means to walk by faith and not by sight, that Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians 5. Faithful Christian witness often looks unimpressive. Choosing integrity when no one else is watching. Speaking the truth gently in a culture of outrage. Remaining faithful in marriage, vocation, and community. Loving the difficult neighbour. Forgiving when retaliation feels justified. None of this looks spectacular, but it is precisely here that the preserving work of salt takes place. We are tempted to think faith only matters when it is seen, when it is applauded, or when it is influential. But Jesus says the opposite. The kingdom often advances through unnoticed faithfulness. Then Jesus, in verse 14 to 16, moves on to say, "You are the light of the world." If salt works quietly, light is very visible, isn't it? Jesus shifts the image from something hidden to something that is impossible to ignore. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. People do not light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Light reveals reality. It exposes what is already there, and throughout Scripture, light is associated with God's own presence. In Matthew's Gospel, Jesus is already being presented as the fulfillment of Isaiah's promises. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Now, astonishingly, Jesus says to his disciples, "You share in that vocation." Crucially, disciples do not produce the light. That's important to remember. What we do is we reflect it, or with the presence of God truly in us, it shines out from us, but its source is always God. This guards us from pride. We are not the source of illumination, God is, but those who live close to him cannot help but shine. Light does not argue, it reveals. Light does not coerce, it clarifies. Light does not dominate, it dispels darkness by simply being present. Jesus says, "Let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." This is not a call to perform righteousness for applause. In fact, later in Matthew 6, Jesus warns against practicing righteousness to be seen. The difference is the direction of glory. The kingdom living does not draw attention to the disciple, but beyond the disciple, to God. Faith that walks by sight wants recognition. Now, faith walks by trust, is content for God to be glorified, even when we ourselves remain unseen. Our good works become signposts, not spotlights. As a nautical person, I sort of see our good works as being like channel markers in a river or in the entrance to a harbour, where we give guidance and warn of where there are danger points and where the safe channel actually is, so that we can successfully navigate to our destination. Light exposes, and exposure is costly. That's the problem with light, isn't it? I remember Bishop Glenn, my former Archbishop of Sydney, and my former regional bishop used to say, "When the spotlight shines on things, the diamonds shine and the cockroaches scatter." And he's absolutely true. To live as a light in the world means refusing to baptize injustice. It means naming sin while extending grace. It means holding to truth in love when silence would be easier. This is where walking by faith, not by sight, becomes essential. The world does not always reward faithfulness. In fact, it often misunderstands it. Jesus does not promise admiration. What he does promise is meaning. Salt may sting when it's applied to a wound, and light may be uncomfortable when it reveals what we would rather hide. But both are acts of love. Jesus then concludes this passage in verses 17 to 18 by saying, "Do not think that I've come to abolish the law, rather I've come to fulfill it." At this point, Jesus anticipates a misunderstanding. Some might hear his call for radical righteousness and assume he is dismissing the law of Moses. Instead, he says, "I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." The Greek word plerao means to bring to fullness, to complete, to bring to their intended goal. Jesus is not rejecting God's commandments. He is simply revealing their deepest meaning. The law was always pointing beyond itself to a life shaped by God and by love of God and love of neighbour. Salt and light are not alternatives to obedience. They are visible fruit of a fulfilled obedience, now refracted through Christ. To walk by faith and not by sight, then, is to live in the tension between what is and what will be. Salt works even when decay seems to linger. Light shines even when darkness feels overwhelming. The disciples listening to Jesus were not powerful. They were not influential. They were not numerous. Yet Jesus entrusted them with nothing less than the vocation of the world's preservation and illumination. Faith declares to believe that ordinary obedience participates in God's extraordinary purposes. So Matthew 5:13 to 18 calls us away from two equal and opposite dangers. It calls us away from withdrawal, hiding our faith out of fear. It calls us away from performance, displaying our faith for approval. Instead, Jesus invites each and every one of us into a life of faithful presence. We are salt, quietly preserving, gently healing, resisting decay. We are light, clearly revealing, courageously, visibly, humbly, and reflectively. We walk by faith, trusting that God is at work even when the results are unseen. And we shine not so that when we are noticed, but so that God is glorified. In a world desperate for hope, Jesus does not offer strategies or slogans. He offers a people, you and me, a people who trust him, a people who live differently, a people through whom the light of the kingdom still shines. And he says to each and every one of us still, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world. The response from us is now, will we live that out in our daily lives as God's people? The Lord be with you.